Welcome to everybody who has joined us this morning. I'm John Hemmings. I'm the Executive Director of Ohio Valley Regional Development Commission. We're in Waverly, Ohio, and serve 12 counties. And this project that you're going to hear about served all 12 of those counties. In 2020, OVRDC, or Ohio Valley Regional Development Commission, we received a EDA CARES Act grant. And as part of that, we decided we wanted to commission 2 studies in our region with the monies that were provided. One was a broadband planning study, looking at where broadband was in our region and strategizing about how do we get those areas that are unserved served. The other was a tourism study. One thing I think COVID taught us, it taught us many things, but one was the importance of broadband. And I don't think anyone on this Zoom meeting this morning could argue with that, and having access to it. And part of that, we knew this when the pandemic hit. There's a lot of areas unserved by broadband in our region of the state. And then something I think we forget about at times, I know I do. This is one of the things that I'm never thinking of. I'm thinking about putting the lines up, getting people access, but affordability for people. It's one of those issues that certainly from the provider standpoint, they're putting up investment and they need to get revenue back. But it's something I think in public policy we sometimes overlook. So I certainly know that that's something that we have to deal with as well in this. But you can't, if you don't have it, you don't have to worry about affording it. So I think our first task, though, is getting access to the technology to people. And then certainly we want to go from there with having people be able to afford it and join. So we developed RFPs. We went through a competitive process, and we were able to select consultants through that process. And for the tourism study, we did select Reid Consulting Group, and you're going to hear from them here in a moment. They're going to be really taking on this presentation and telling you the work they did. This was not work that we did, Gina, myself, or any of the staff here at OVRDC. We are not broadband experts in any way, shape, or form. We are just facilitators to kind of take the lead in the region to see that this technology is continued to be developed. So just for a moment, I want to turn the meeting over to Gina Collinsworth, our Public Information Coordinator. Gina is going to talk about something exciting that we just got into back in April and May of this year, and still involved, and about a broadband cohort that she's participating in. So Gina, I'll turn it over to you, and then just give it back to me, and I'll get us rolling with Reid Consulting Group.
Thanks, John. I just wanted to share with everyone, it's pretty great news. We are always looking, how can we extend the work we've been doing? So the 2 years of broadband study have helped us all kind of get up to speed on what's available and what we actually have in service. But this opportunity came through Broadband Ohio. It's called a Community Accelerator Program. For 15 weeks, 8 county members are represented in our team cohort, and we're going to be giving quite a bit of time, 2 hours a week, for 15 weeks to extend our education on broadband in our region, make it very custom, and figure out a plan for moving forward on implementation. And as John said, our number one priority of access, but also we want to learn more about that digital equity piece and the affordability in our region. So we're excited that about 15 people on our team have said, yes, we want to help. We all want to get together, and we're thinking this is going to be definitely a consensus building opportunity. So we might be reaching out to some of you for survey information or just your general comments about broadband in your area. We want to make sure we have a plan at the end of the 15 weeks that will help the region. Real briefly, our team members, I want to give a shout out because I really appreciate that they're on board. Scotty Powell is the Scioto County Commissioner. He's on board. David Painter, Claremont County Commissioner. Brian Rice, VP of Technology and Infrastructure at Southern State Community College. That's in Highland County. Holly Johnson, Economic Development Director for Adams County. Terry Featheroff, who's on our call today. She's from Benton County, the Economic Development Director there. We have really great participation from the USDA Rural Development people. We've got Michael Rutherford and also Anthony Tyndall. We have Sarah Beath in Brown County, the county administrator. We've got Corey Watson in Lawrence County, director of technology. Godwin Apalaya in Fayette County, he's the economic development director. Malcolm Miller is also in Fayette County. Mike Meadows in Fayette County. Larry Mullins in Sauter County, he's the ESC director, and we're thinking ESC directors are going to be important in our broadband discussions. And then I'm sorry, not ESC. Yeah, Emergency Management System, EMS. And then we have Kara Copeland, who is ESC in Sauter County, and that's an educational organization that supports schools and what they need training wise. So we have a great team. Be looking for information, and we'll try to get that out and get your response to broadband, because that's why we're here, is, you know, to make the region better, and broadband is so important. It's infrastructure. This is the time historically. We need to keep pushing on it, and we're glad to be part of that. So thank you, John, for the opportunity to talk about all the great people who have decided they want to work on the broadband cohort with us, and Broadband Ohio. Thank you for the opportunity.
Without any further ado, we will get into our presentation, but just real quick, I said we went through an RFP process. Through that process, we selected Reid Consulting Group, and just a shout out for them and the work they've done for us. But even prior, I was glad that they were the selected consultant. We had some good RFP responses. It was a competitive process, but I think they won out because of their familiarity with the region here in Southern Ohio, because the company is based in Ohio, Appalachia. I've known Tom Reid. When the years get into double digits, you can't keep track of it. So I've known Tom for a long time and respect him and his work. So with that said, it was a good choice, I think. I have no regrets about the decision we made to bring Reid Consulting Group in to do this study for us. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Tom Reid. I know Sean O'Malley's with his consulting group, and they're going to do this presentation. So Tom, take us away.
Thanks, John. I'm glad you have no regrets. In terms of how long we've known each other, I've decided to start counting my age in decades.
Okay.
This it makes me feel so much younger. Yeah, happy to be here today. I'm gonna present some of this information, and Sean's gonna jump in on some of the detailed county by county information that we've created for you. And Kim Corrier is also on the line, another member of the RCG team, and she'll address any questions that come up. So what we've been focused on is analyzing fixed broadband. So a wire or wireless connection to your home, not something that moves around. It's not a mobile broadband service. And we've primarily focused on residential and small business locations. The schools and libraries and healthcare entities have largely been served by previous programs that built out middle mile and connections to high capacity users. But getting down into the residential locations and small businesses has been more of a trick. There are other issues that we hope to address in the future. Mobile services, as we know, a lot of the areas also don't have mobile services. And then in extending the tourism capabilities, so we have a lot of parks and lodges without adequate broadband as well. But this analysis is really focused on getting fixed broadband into homes and small businesses. So OVRDC was joined by the other local development districts in Appalachian Ohio, so that we've got kind of a single voice. And a lot of that then is being articulated on the website that we call Connecting Appalachia. So Connecting Appalachia is not an organization. Connecting Appalachia is basically a place to collect the information that we produced for the various local development districts. So OVRDC, as John mentioned, been working with him for a long time. Our first big broadband push in Ohio was in John's territory with the Southern Ohio Healthcare Network, which built a fiber network in 13 counties to connect healthcare facilities. And we've expanded from there. There's been a lot of other partners involved, both as collaborators and funders in this effort. So our goal is we want to identify and prioritize. So I know a lot of people get kind of study fatigue, right? We've studied and studied and studied, and now we really want solutions. But we have to really be able to identify the areas, to be able to apply for funding, make sure that we're building out the areas that actually need the services. So identify and prioritize is kind of the first step. Second step is to secure the funding. And that's a huge step when you do secure the funding. And in the first round of grants from Broadband Ohio, Southeastern Ohio was highly prioritized. And then you need to track and enforce. So getting the money is good, but you have to make sure that what is promised is actually done. And that's been a big problem in the last 30 years, is a lack of tracking and enforcement. So that tracking and enforcement can be really critical. So the digital desert is much more extensive than I think most people realized, although those of us in Southern Ohio already knew. But this was a real eye-opener at a statewide level to develop this map. We were doing the analysis for OVRDC and the other local development districts in Appalachian Ohio, but it turned out to be just as easy to analyze the whole state. It was actually harder to go through the data and say, well, we only want these counties. So we just did the whole state. And this became a really critical effort in opening people's eyes to how extensive the issue is. So those red areas are areas where you can't even get the really low 10 megabits down, 1 megabits up. So you couldn't even get 10.1. Basically, we're saying in all those red areas, there's no broadband. In the orange areas, we could see that people could get the 10.1 speeds, but they couldn't get the 25.3, which is 25 megabits down, 3 megabits up. So by the federal definitions of served and unserved, the red and orange areas are unserved. The yellow and light green are underserved. So the yellow would probably be our, well, it would be our next priority. They can get 25.3, but they can't get 50.10. And then the light green is you can get 50.10, but you can't get 100 by 20. And to earn that dark green, you had to be reliably providing a 100 megabits down and 20 megabits up. And I notice we have Ashley from Charter here today. The cable companies generally really get mad at us about the light green areas, because in a lot of those light green areas, you can get more than 100 megabits down, but it's the upload speed that has been the constraint. So we're hoping the cable companies will take this as an opportunity to seek some funding to upgrade those networks so that they can be closer to symmetrical speeds. So all this mapping was done based on data from a company called Ookla. And you may never have heard of Ookla, but if you ever just Google speed test because you want to do a speed test, almost always end up on Ookla's site. And so right out of the gate, the state of Ohio licensed this Ookla data, and we had now over 9 million consumer-initiated speed tests. So consumer-initiated mean you or I Google speed test, we pull up the Ookla app, and we run a speed test. We had over 9 million of those. So we didn't have to go around and try to get people to take the test, as some states have been doing. The state of Ohio just licensed that data and gave us access to it. That was through Innovate Ohio. We do continue encouraging involvement. More data is better. So taking speed tests is important. Filling out the surveys is extremely helpful. We get really some excellent content back from the residential surveys. We haven't gotten as many business surveys. So anybody want to encourage business people to respond, that would be great. So you can go to the connectingappalachia.org/get involved and be able to do that. So we encourage people to continue to promote this, because we're going to want to continue analyzing speed test data over time to see that things have actually improved. So when we look at this from a numerical perspective, that's 65% of the populated acres in Ohio are either unserved or underserved. It's half, fully half can't get 10.1. So in half of the populated acreage in Ohio, there's basically no broadband. And that comes out to right about 800,000 homes. When we look at what the FCC said in their last version of the mapping, they would say there's about 200,000 homes. And you're going, holy cow, you know, the Reid Consulting Group thinks it's 4 times worse than that. But Microsoft thinks it's 10 times worse than the FCC. They believe there's about 2 million unserved homes in Ohio. So we feel good about the 800,000 number. We think it's a reasonable number, and reflects really a very difficult situation for a lot of people in our region. So when we look at the region overall, it's the Appalachian Ohio region. It's 75% of the populated square miles are below 25.3, and that's about 1/3 of the households. Really, this is an issue of population density. When we wonder how is half the state not able to get broadband, and why do we need subsidies for this? It really boils down to population density. So in Columbus, we're at 1,500 households per square mile. You get down to a little town like Gallipolis, and we're 422 households per square mile. It's, you know, a lot less, 30% of what's the Columbus population density is, but Gallipolis still offers enough population density to be a viable market for a broadband provider. Where we really end up in difficulty is in what we call the rural expanse. So if you look at the entirety of Vinton County, including the towns in Vinton County, we're only at 33 households per square mile. And we go over to Athens County and look at it in Carthage Township, 17 households per square mile. So you get down into those numbers, and there just is not a financial model where you can say, hey, I'll build out infrastructure into this area to provide broadband. That's why we end up needing the subsidies. So this is not a new goal. This is one thing I think is really important. This is not some new entitlement thought up by some politicians. This dates back to 1934, when Congress passed the Communications Act, because cities and towns were getting telephones and rural areas weren't. And the Congress, in its wisdom at the time, said, and I'll just quote it here because it says it so well, all people in the United States shall have access to rapid, efficient, nationwide communication service with adequate facilities at reasonable charges. I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to achieve now in the broadband space. And this worked really well in getting telephone services into our areas. We wouldn't have had telephone services in our rural areas without the Communications Act of 1934 that's trying to level the playing field between urban and rural areas. The FCC, Federal Communications Commission, has been the primary vehicle through which that funding has been dispersed. And since 1990, when the internet really got going, the FCC has spent $100 billion sent to the traditional telephone companies. And here we are in this situation. So we still wonder where the $100 billion went. Congressman Johnson tried to help us get to the bottom of it. FCC considers most of that information proprietary. We asked for the records about where all that money went, and what we got back looked like something from the NSA. It was about 95% redacted. It was been really frustrating. We thought this would be a scandal. People would really get excited about it. We'd see Nightline with a story on the missing $100 billion. But I guess the big lesson we've learned from it is we don't want to repeat the same pattern of pouring money into the problem and the problem not being solved. The issue that we're having, and I like to use road analogies to explain some of these things. So just imagine if we just stopped road maintenance for a few decades. And I know some people feel like we've stopped road maintenance anyway because there's some pretty big potholes, but just imagine that it continues. So we'd end up with, car eating potholes to begin with. And by the time 30 years are over, you've got a goat path, basically a four-wheeler track. And that's what's happened in the telecommunications space. So the telephone companies installed copper cables that really did a great job providing telephone services, but they're more than 50 years old. The newest ones are more than 50 years old. So they're just no longer capable of supporting the services that we need, the modern telecommunication services. And in fact, in a lot of our region, just wired telephone service is no longer reliable, let alone broadband. So there's huge life safety risks, the fact that we have this completely decrepit telecommunications infrastructure in a lot of areas. And that's why it's so important that we address this issue. One of the really critical pieces is we need specifications for what we're going to do with this money. So if you're building a road, there's going to be infrastructure specifications really detailed about what's going to happen at each layer, how thick those layers are, what kind of material you can use, and so forth. But in broadband, we have largely not had specifications. It's just been speed targets. Hey, we need 25.3 in this area. Well, how are you going to provide it? What are the requirements in terms of infrastructure, specifications? It just hasn't happened. So really, to get longevity and the capacity we need long-term, we need robust networks that can actually, like a road, last for 30, 40 years. So this chart can seem a little daunting just in terms of the complexity of it, but if you go back to 1990, the internet started way back in the 60s, but it was mostly used by academic researchers and the Defense Department. But in 1990 is when we started seeing the WWW. So suddenly it became accessible to the average person, and that was in about 1990. Then Zoom, as we're on now, launched about 2010. So if you plot the average internet speed for a well-connected community, it's gone up tenfold each decade. So today, well, 2020, the average speed in a well-served area was 100 megabits down and 20 megabits up. That 25.3 standard that has been used so much hasn't been relevant for 10 years when it was the average speed back in 2012. So really what's relevant today is 100 by 20, and that's been the focus of the federal government, is to say 100 by 20 is the new target. But that's the target for today. As the technology continues to advance and the services get more sophisticated, what's it going to look like? Augmented reality, immersive VR, I'm not sure, but it doesn't seem like the technology curve is slowing. So if you extend that curve, then and anytime you extend a line over a trend line over 30 years, yeah, there may be a break point at some point in the future. But again, if you just extend it the way it has been for the last 30 years, for the next 30 years, then we go to 1 gigabit in 2030, 10 gigabits in 2040, and 100 gigabits in 2050. So really very high speeds. And, is that reasonable? Well, there's already markets offering more than 1 gigabit services, as high as 5 gigabit connections into homes. So yeah, totally imaginable that we'll be at a 1 gigabit standard in the next few years. 10 gigabits can deliver that today to people's homes. If you've built fiber to the home there, it's entirely feasible to do that today. And 100 gigabits to homes and small businesses, yeah, maybe that won't happen. but we're talking about 30 years. It's hard as a futurist to really think through what could happen in 30 years. But the goal of being technology neutral, I really like the goal, but the technology has to be able to meet the needs of 2055, because that's, you know, the getting 30-year life out of it. And things like DSL, fixed wireless, and satellite, it's going to top out at 100 megabits per second. You might get it up to 200 megabits per second in terms of average speed to a residential location. Cable modems going to top out at about 1 gigabit per second. There's some developments that may make it go a little bit higher than that, but generally about 1 gigabit per second. But if you're looking at technology today that can get to that 100 gigabit mark, the only thing available is fiber. Fiber is the only technology that can do 100 gigabits per second today. So if you have to pick today, what can I deploy that will meet the needs of 2055? Right now, fiber is the only answer for you. So in that infrastructure planning horizon, that's what's so critical, is we don't want a solution that lasts for 5 years. You know, so if you shoot to, hey, let's get 100 by 20 service in there, because that's what we need today. If we could instantly provide everybody 100 by 20, that would be great. It'd be a revolution in our region to do that. But that's the need today, and it takes years to build out infrastructure. It's just like building your water systems, your highways, your bridges. You want to plan it out and you want it to last. And so our infrastructure planning horizon goes from about 2025 to 2055 for this broadband topic. And that's why I just really encourage everybody to think long-term. We don't want to just solve today's problem. We want to solve the problem all the way out to 2055. And there are some short-term efforts that can make a big difference. Well, we've seen a lot of that during the pandemic. Schools put Wi-Fi access points in their parking lots, schools and libraries. McDonald's kept their Wi-Fi on even when their dining rooms were closed. And so there were a lot of short-term efforts to try to extend services to people without them. And, you know, that's where we've got all those pictures of people, you know, trying to be a school teacher from their car in the McDonald's parking lot and things like that. So short-term efforts can help relieve the pain. We just don't want to confuse a short-term effort with a solution. We still need to build out the infrastructure. So one of the big issues with the infrastructure, most of the fiber is built on existing utility poles in our area. Some of it goes underground, but most of it is going in the air on those poles. And the electrical infrastructure is up toward the top. And then you'll see a service drop, electrical service drop going to a home. And then 40 inches below the electrical infrastructure, you have the communications infrastructure. So you might see the telephone wires at the top, and you might see cable TV below that. And then if you need to attach to those poles, you're going to go even lower. And there's a minimum clearance that you need to maintain from the ground based on the National Electric Safety Code. So you're going to look at each span between two poles and say, okay, if I run another cable down here at 10 inches, 12 inches below the next one up, do I still maintain that minimum clearance or not? And because we have such beautiful terrain here, it's common for that minimum clearance to be violated when somebody wants to put another cable on there. And when that happens, you need to replace one or both poles in that span just to get them to be taller. So when you put that other cable in there, it meets the minimum clearance. So this is generally called make ready. So you're making the existing poles ready for a fiber attachment. And that can get really expensive to do make ready. So in our analysis of the costs, we're looking for a high strand count design, meaning you don't just run the minimum number of fiber strands to do the job today, that you're going with a higher strand count so that you can support growth in the population, you can support mobile services going into the area, smart grid for the electrical utilities and so forth. We're looking at armored cable installed to USDA specifications. They have hundreds of pages of specifications, so we don't have to award these contracts without specifications. And as said, assuming it's aerial. If you go underground, you're going to spend more than this. So that make-ready component, we're saying a range of $32,000 to $60,000 per mile for make-ready. And we stuck at $41,000 a mile because that's about what it would cost to build your own communication pole route if the make-ready was just too expensive. And then the fiber construction, 32 to 40. So we end up with a total cost per fiber mile of $64,000 to $100,000. And for our analysis, we plugged that in at $81,000. Now you will hear people say, oh, I can build fiber much less expensively, but you need to make sure they've actually considered all the aspects, because you have to engineer it, detailed engineering, pole by pole by pole. You have to submit all that to the electric company. They have to come back with costs to do the make ready. You have to buy the fiber. You have to actually construct the fiber. You have to light the fiber. So we're talking about all of those costs built into this number, as a lot of people will quote you just kind of partials. We are really concerned about the inflationary impact. As we know, inflation in general is an issue in the telecommunications space, particularly in the fiber to the home space. Inflation is definitely a factor. So we're not sure. We'll keep an eye on this and update these figures as time goes on. But inflation is definitely affecting the cost of these deployments. So when we look at the OVRDC counties, you'll see that 72% of the populated acres are either below 10.1 or below 25.3. They're unserved. They're those red and orange areas. And that's 29% of the households impacted. In previous efforts, talk about the Southern Ohio Healthcare Network, we were able to build a lot of fiber. And this is open middle mile fiber. Horizon was the contractor that won that. And that's in blue there. We did identify a few areas that would be helpful to build additional middle mile as part of this project. And those are the pink lines. So this existing middle mile infrastructure really has been great for the schools, healthcare facilities, and cell towers, primarily, large businesses too. But you'll see that we've got those blue lines going right through red areas. And the hope initially in the old days was that having this middle mile through this area would make it then cost effective to serve people in these areas. And it just doesn't work out. The population densities are so low, you still need a subsidy for that to make sense. So when we look at how do we get the rest of these areas served, what we did is just kind of created a single orange color for all the areas below 25.3, just make it a little easier to see. And then one of the first efforts was the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. That's from the Federal Communications Commission. This was completed back in, I guess it was late 2020. They did this thing called a reverse auction. Identified areas they say were unserved. They put a price tag on each of those areas, and then they started an auction. Hey, would you do this for 100% of the money we say it's going to cost? And of course, a lot of people said yes. Then they went down to 90%, down to 80%, down to 70%. And the bidding got really low in Ohio. It got very strangely low in Ohio, but a lot of blocks were awarded. So all of the dark blue areas were awarded to Charter. Charter won about 100,000 households in Ohio. Next here was a consortium that bid. SOX was the local member of that consortium. And so their pink areas were won by SOX. And then there's a little bit you can see from Cincinnati Bell, this kind of dark pink color. So it is picking up a significant portion of our area. And then when we look at the Ohio Residential Broadband Expansion Grant Program, we don't have all of the data from that yet. We have partial data now. The state is still discussing with all the winners, getting their final address lists, but we do know some of it. So Horizon won a portion of Western Ross County and up here in Fayette. South Central Power won these areas that you see in dark yellow. So we start to kind of just work through all these various areas that still have needs. So we end up identifying these remaining orange areas as areas where we need to come up with a plan, a project plan, and find a source of funding and an ISP willing to take on those areas. For instance, over in Gallia County, I know there are some areas awarded to JB Nets. We don't have that shown here yet. And congratulations to JB Nets in snagging some of that. I believe SOX also won some additional areas. We don't have that mapped yet. But again, we just want to keep updating this map so we can see what's addressed, focus on the areas that haven't been addressed yet, and then monitor progress in these areas that have been awarded. So if somebody says they're going to build that out in 2 years, well, we should be able to see that reality in the speed test data. So in Orbeg, you'll see that there were, as I mentioned, JB Nets and SOX did win areas. SOX and Pike and Scioto, JB Nets and Gallia that we don't have mapped yet. Spectrum picked up some additional areas as well. So yeah, good news there. We are really fortunate in Ohio because Broadband Ohio is ahead of the game. I talked to a lot of people around the country, and most states are nowhere near where Ohio is in understanding the issue, having a broadband office in place that understands the issues and has a clear kind of mission and vision. So we're really fortunate. I was blown away how fast they came up with this grant program and were able to administer that grant program. I kept thinking, oh, we'll hear about a 6-month delay and a 6-month delay and a 6-month delay because it's complex. It's difficult. They met all their timelines, got these grants out the door. Yeah, we're really fortunate to have them. So the funding opportunities in that identify, prioritize, and fund. So we need to fund. And so the FCC, they had RDOF phase 1, which is already concluded. RDOF phase 2, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, they do have more money. I'm not sure about a timeline for phase 2. I think they're waiting to see how some of these other funds play out. And there is something called the Rural 5G Fund, because as we know, there's a lot of areas don't have mobile service. They're trying to tackle that. USDA has a couple of programs, Reconnect and Community Connect. And then Appalachian Regional Commission has the Power Program and the Distressed County Program. Then Broadband Ohio has that Ohio Residential Broadband Expansion Grant Program. Phase 1 or round 1's done. No clear indication right now when round 2 will happen. And then the two kind of really big things that have occurred is NTIA was awarded funding through the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. And Ohio should be getting about $1 billion from that. And then there's the Treasury Capital Projects Fund. Ohio should get about $270 million for that. Both of those funding sources, though, are going to run through Broadband Ohio. So the lion's share of the funding is going to be administered by Broadband Ohio. And again, in Ohio, that's great news. Broadband Ohio is ahead of the game. Other states, it's a little more worrying. And the county broadband profiles can really help identify and prioritize those areas. Sean, you want to talk about the county profiles?
Yeah, Tom, go ahead and turn off your screen share while I'm introducing here. So we put together planning documents for all of the OVRDC counties. These are meant to help you identify where you want to continue to focus, because you'll be able to see which areas are unserved and which ones had funding already. That also have a number of views looking at in terms of residential population, business density, things like that. And you can basically sit down with this and create project areas based on it. So I'm going to go through one as an example. I will go ahead and share my screen. So I picked Pike County for this. I could do pretty much any county on here. I feel like Pike has a good distribution of things, so you can see how the maps behave. So the first page in these profiles is going to be that speed map. So you're going to have the color coding to show what is well served, what is underserved, what is unserved, going from red the worst, green the best. And it gives you the stats on the overall coverage in that county. And then it has that existing middle mile. So that dark blue is the horizon middle mile that's already there in Pike in this case. So I believe.
I just want to mention really quickly, we would love to map other people's fiber infrastructure, but most of the other companies operating in these areas consider that proprietary and will not give us that detail.
Yeah, so that can be a challenge, or the companies don't open their fiber up, like they build their middle mile and they do it exclusively for their own provision. It still would be useful to know where it was, but yeah, we do face that challenge of getting the data for it. So then a different view of the county. We changed the color coding here. We just blanked out anywhere that showed as already served. So that's the white. And then the single orange color is anywhere that is unserved. And the dots on here are business locations based on Dun & Bradstreet. They have a pretty comprehensive database of business information. It's not perfect. Sometimes you'll have something in there that might have gone out of business a year ago or something, but it's one of the better sources out there for data. So they identify the business name, its location, its industry sector, and how many employees it has usually. So we plotted those using varying sized dots to show how much internet demand we would expect them to have. So the bigger a dot gets, the more demand there is. And that could be a result of number of employees. It also could be a result of the sector it's in. So for example, if you have a construction firm that's got 50 employees, you also have a medical clinic that has 50 employees. Most likely the medical clinic is going to have significantly more broadband demand because most of those employees are going to be in that clinic all day with iPads, laptops and things, doing patient charts, uploading scans into the cloud to get analyzed and sent back. Now that's not to say the construction company doesn't need broadband. They do. They still have an office. They've got folks who are in there, but it's probably 3 or 4 people who are in the office all day, and then the other 47 of them are out in the field on projects. So we have a multiplier to make the dot bigger if it's like a healthcare or education, IT location. So when the benefit of using this map is that you can look in here and you can see, like, we've got these areas that are served already, and you got a pretty good concentration of businesses in them. But we've got other places like down here, South Central Pike, up here in the Northwest area, you have sections with businesses that are trying to operate in what is essentially unserved territory with very bad broadband. That could be something that you would end up deciding, we want to focus on this area, especially if you're applying for a grant that has an economic development component that focuses on encouraging business. So this can be useful from that standpoint. You can also overlay where people live. Now we can't plot all 13,000 households for Pike on a sheet this size, but we were able to do a scatter plot like this that gives you the sense of how the density is and where the population follows the roads and things. So if you remember down here with those businesses in this area, in the kind of south central section, there's also a decent concentration of households. So that can be an attractive area possibly. To help figure out planning for actually running the fiber infrastructure, we use unserved roads as our shorthand for how much fiber you have to build. It's a pretty standard approach when you're estimating because you have to get this is last mile. You have to get the fiber to all the houses. The houses are on the roads, of course. So you end up following those roads. So this plot, again, this dark blue is the horizon fiber, but all of these lighter colored lines, those are all of the roads that pass through unserved census blocks. So, sometimes it'll look like a road just sort of disappears, and that's because it's passing out of an unserved area into a served area. So if you're going to serve all of the unserved area in Pike, for example, you'd need about 500 miles of fiber. In terms of the total cost for this, this is the breakdown for Pike. Again, we did this for every county. Couple of caveats I want to say about these numbers because they're going to look very big. Things are expensive. but also we're designing this for a fiber network that's going to last. This would be high quality, high strand count cables installed to USDA specs. So it would be the kind of thing that would hold up for 40 years. It'd have excess capacity to be able to handle population expansion when the word gets out that there's good broadband in the region. So total cost would be about a little over 42 million. You'd pick up about 6,700 households, and the density is about a little under 14 households per fiber mile. At that rate, we figure an internet provider is going to be willing to kick in about 1,700 of their own money per household to do it. So the internet provider match would be about 11.7 million. So you still got a gap of over 33 million, about a $5,000 per household subsidy. That's within reason. A number of the Ohio residential broadband expansion grant programs were a lot more than that. They were up in the 7,000 per household range. So like, don't be daunted by these numbers. They are doable. And as you'll see in a moment on the next map, these numbers will drop as you take into account state and federal programs that end up getting deployed, because of course, that's going to reduce the percentage.
Well, I like to compare it to highway miles. We're talking about $33.6 million funding gap to build almost 500 miles of internet fiber highway. And an actual physical highway is going to cost you about $10 million a mile, sometimes more. So we're talking about 3 miles of highway. And they are both infrastructure. So I think it's a good comparison.
Yeah, good point, Tom. So I was talking about the numbers going down as we have funding become available. So this map is a close-up of the results from the RDOF auction. So the dark blue is Charter. Their internet brand is Spectrum. So like when we look at the state stuff, it's called Spectrum rather than Charter. This light pink is Next Year Consortium, which in our part of the state is Southern Ohio Communications. And then this darker pink is LTD Broadband. The pale blue, Mercury Wireless. We've already seen Charter hitting the ground in some counties doing work on their RDOF awards. So we are cautiously optimistic that they're going to end up serving all of the territories that they won in the state. They actually started work in Guernsey, I think, before their funding got finally authorized from RDOF. So they seem to be putting their money where their mouth is. Southern Ohio Communications is also, is planning on doing the work in those spaces. So these areas you could probably take off the map. So like down here in this area, remember I was talking about the business and residential concentrations. Some of that's going to be covered through these programs. LTD, Mercury Wireless, we have not heard much of anything from them other than that LTD got in trouble for violating the bidding rules at one point and got fined because they were apparently sharing their strategy with other companies. Mercury Wireless has not really done anything that we're aware of other than just the minimal, like filing the paperwork to be considered a provider. But we're figuring most likely Mercury Wireless is going to abandon their space. They want just a scattershot all through the state of territory, and that's really hard to build a fiber network in, especially when you don't have a presence in the state already. Because if you look at Charter space, it's kind of scattershot too, but they've got a lot of territory adjoining that they already serve. So it's just kind of a logical expansion for them. We don't have the state material on this yet. You have to kind of draw a line when you're building a static document like this, and the state awards have not been announced when we built the static maps for this. As things go forward, we can update that. It'll be more useful. We'll also provide a web map version of this to OVRDC with a login that they can share with county planning officials so that you can go in with a web browser and interact with this stuff live. You can turn these layers on and off. You can zoom, you could zoom into this part of the county and then like turn the RDOF layer off, change the transparency so you can see like the roads and the towns underneath. You can superimpose the business numbers or the population density. And it makes it easier for you to be able to say, yeah, we want to focus right in on here. And like this spot, maybe we're going to try for an Appalachian Regional Commission power grant in this area. And over here, like this, we'll try maybe like in this one, we'll see if we can find a way to incentivize Charter to actually cover this whole space instead of just these little spots in there. And
I think this is a really good point, Sean, that we're not going to see a single funding program solve this whole problem. That, as is so typical in our region, we figure out the areas and then we match them up to the funding opportunities. So there might be something that makes a lot of sense for ARC Power, another area that makes sense for Orbeg, another one that makes sense for another program. So as usual in our area, we have to kind of piece it together. But the good news is some of the pieces are already in place, and now we can identify where the rest of them are and do that matchmaking process.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I'm not going to read all this methodology to you all. I just want to make you aware that it's there. We wanted to be transparent about how we put these maps together, because we do get criticism from folks who want to call it into question. So we want to just be obvious up front. Here's how we did it, so you can do your own analysis and decide, yeah, okay, that makes sense. We've got the breakdown here for those business dots I was telling you about, making them bigger. So here's the range on it. So healthcare, IT, banking, things like that are the big players. Down here on the low demand side, you have things like farming and energy, raw material like mining, resource extraction. Farming, sometimes folks who don't farm kind of raise their eyebrows at. They're like, why are you doing broadband for farming? It's digital these days too. Modern tractors often use the cloud to communicate their status, or use it to analyze the patterns that you're using as you work the fields. Dairy farms, all of the milking equipment, it tends to be internet enabled, and it uses that to monitor the status of the cows, because if the cows aren't happy, they don't produce good milk. Horse farms, they have fetal monitors for horses when they're getting ready to foal, that again are internet enabled. If you don't have broadband, you end up, I was actually speaking with someone over in another county, in Tuscarawas County, who runs a horse farm. And because they have no broadband, they can't use those fetal monitors. So the woman has to spend the night in the stable for about 2 weeks when a mare gets close to foaling, because otherwise she won't know when it goes into labor, and there's a risk of losing the foal. So even, go ahead, Tom.
Well, yeah, one thing I want to point out here is these ones that are rated 1, like the contractor. It's not that the contractor doesn't need broadband. It's just that given that their people are probably out in the field most of the time, they don't need as much broadband as like healthcare or a K-12 school that you see as a multiplier of 5. So we're not trying to say those areas should be ignored that have businesses that have a multiplier of 1. We're just saying their demand for the capacity is going to be lower than like a healthcare or a K-12 school.
Yeah, and sometimes, and many of the healthcare and schools have already been served with those previous projects. But like sometimes, like you might end up with a more compelling case for an area that has a whole bunch of 1 and 2 rated businesses in it, because there are a lot of them. And when you look at the numbers, like there are a lot of folks who are trying to make a go of it, running a small business out of their home or nearby where they live. And that demand ends up more than if you had like 1 or 2 big players in that same place. We do a breakdown, again, the stuff that Tom explained about our cost estimates, giving more details about the assumptions we made there, again, because we want to be upfront so that people understand this and it's not just a black box. We have a slightly simplified version of that demand curve graph. This seems to be a really useful image to use when you're talking to like funding agencies, or when you're making the case and someone says, well, you don't need that in this area, like the demand's not there. And then you can point out how the demand has been changing and how we line up with it. And we always tend to fall underneath that line right now. And finally, there's a breakdown on how we built the numbers. And again, the thing to keep in mind is that these were built to assume that there was no funding. As we're able to map more of these current funding programs, we will be able to provide a smaller number on that estimate. If you want to be like the optimistic estimate, it's like, okay, if all these providers meet their commitments, here's what the numbers will be. Tom, I'll go ahead and turn this back over to you.
Okay. So you can, we've got them for each of the counties, and you can go get those at connectingappalachia.org/mapping/county profiles. Hopefully they are useful planning documents. Then, as I mentioned, kind of piecing things together, this is just an example of a power project that went in Carroll County in cooperation with Charter, so Spectrum Communications. So it hasn't been funded yet, but the idea here is using these maps, we're able to identify project areas. So with the county commissioners and Charter, they identified these project areas, and that became the basis of the application. So they're looking for $2 million from power, 1.1 million from ARPA funding from the county, 874,000 from Charter in match. So $4 million project. And you'll see their per mile numbers are significantly lower. And we trust that Charter understands the region and the electric provider. They feel comfortable with those numbers. So that's a good example of trying to piece things together, identify the areas, prioritize the areas, and then try to do the matchmaking on the funding opportunity and an ISP interested in doing it. Another one that's kind of an interesting one, Coshocton County did this big project with Ohio TT. So Ohio TT is a fixed wireless provider, and it's a $5 million in county ARPA funds to put up 11 new towers and use 10 existing ones and do this CBRS fixed wireless, kind of this newer fixed wireless technology to them. And at first, my feeling about this was kind of silly. It's gonna not be a long-term solution. Let's wait for the fiber to the home solution. But as I've thought about it more, I've realized that one of the big benefits here is it's gonna have a competitive overlay. So if you award an area to a specific ISP in these rural areas that have very low population density, well, no one had ever built there before because it didn't make economic sense. So now you come up with a grant program to get someone to build there. No one else is going to build there because it's not financially feasible. So you end up with a de facto monopoly in that area. And, bad things can happen from monopoly power. So having Ohio TT as an overlay across whoever does fiber to the home creates a competitive pressure that I think will work well. Ohio TT has also designed it so that those same towers can be used for extending mobile services. So the mobile overlay can be there as well. So this is really interesting development. It'd be great to watch Coshocton County as a model for some of the other efforts around the region. So, this broadband topic really is a fight for our future. And I probably don't need to get on this soapbox given the audience, but I can't really, I think, overstate the importance of solving this problem, because if we don't solve this problem, we're just going to be untapped and hollowed out. A lot of human potential wasted, and our economic health very much in jeopardy. But with broadband, the area will be much more vibrant and productive. Productivity will go up. This is not a supposition. This is proven in so many different studies that you bring broadband to an area where there was not broadband, productivity goes up, average household income goes up, and tax revenues increase. Okay, this isn't instant. It's not like, oh, you build fiber broadband and suddenly you've solved the socioeconomic problems in that county. It takes time, but without the broadband there, it's not going to happen. Early on, you'll probably see, the person who was always really good with computers but didn't have the money to go to college. Broadband now is available to them. They get a job being technical support for a company working remotely. There's a lot of remote technical support jobs now. And maybe 5 years later, they've taken some online coursework and they're a software developer. So suddenly, they start out making $40,000 a year. 5 years later, they're making $80,000 a year, and they become an example for others around them. Or you have the person who is always who people go to get comfort to when they're having personal struggles. Well, there's a lot of support lines that they can work for remotely. So maybe that person ends up working for a support line. There's a farmer suicide network now because farmers have been struggling so much. So there's a specific hotline to help farmers struggling. And then you could have somebody like my father-in-law, who's a very skilled machinist. And before he retired, he built a machine shop, and he takes little jobs from neighbors. Well, to a good broadband connection, he could make his services and skills available on a global basis and help educate the next generation, because as a lot of you know, machinists are kind of aging out like so many other skilled laborers. We really need a way to share their knowledge and experience with a broad audience. So it's a process that takes time, but if we don't build the broadband, the process doesn't get started. And actually, it'll pay for itself just in increased tax revenues. In 7 years or less, it'll pay for itself. These subsidies will be long forgotten that we had to spend money to get it there, because the tax revenues will be so much more robust. So we really need to keep the focus on this. We actually need to achieve it this time rather than have the money disappear somewhere. As we've talked before, we're cautiously optimistic that it's actually going to work this time. Broadband Ohio really seems to have a clear vision and an intent to enforce the grant requirements. So, and we really hope it works, and greatly appreciate the opportunity we've had to work with John and Gina and so many people out in these various counties. So I think we can open it up for questions, discussion, any other topics. I know we've got Gary Cooper on the phone. We've got Ashley on the phone. I'm not sure if we have any other ISPs represented on the call. They may want to say something about what they're doing in their areas with their own perspectives.
This is Gary Cooper. We have construction in progress on the first 90 miles, which is going through parts of Pike County, Waverly County. Then the next portion we have that we're planning is an additional 375 miles that we've started the engineering on. So that's kind of progress for us.
That's fantastic.
Can I ask Gary real quick, how is the availability of your raw materials? How is that coming?
On this first project, we anticipated actually 2 years ago, and we pre-ordered, and so we have raw materials pretty much in stock that we need. We're still waiting on a few items, but we pre-ordered early on to get ahead of the curve, and we are ahead of the curve.
Great.
That's great. We've got AT&T here as well. Ashley, you want to say anything about Spectrum's progress on RDOF builds?
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. So as Tom mentioned, we were awarded about 110,000 locations across the state of Ohio. We have started our builds in 4 different counties in Ohio. In the OVRDC region, we're actually building right now in Jackson, but we'll continue to move throughout the area as we progress. So a lot of good things coming. And as he mentioned, we also were lucky enough to win additional areas in the OVRDC counties through the state grant process as well. So
that's fantastic.
I would just add here, and I appreciate again everyone's participation this morning. And I would like to say that we were looking forward in our efforts here at OVRDC, because you heard Tom speak about there's still mapping to be done. We have a grant, another grant through the state of Ohio that just so happens to be from EDA federally. And I just got my sub-award on that 2 weeks ago to move forward. I'm hoping to continue Tom's contract. That'll be up to my board next Thursday. So I'm hopeful they'll allow me to do that, and that we can negotiate with Tom and Reid Consulting Group to continue that, to provide some of the additional things we've talked about here today, and that is to continue mapping the region and helping us, as Tom pointed out with the Carroll County project. the ARC power program we spoke of, that's something that is available in our area. And I think if we had the opportunity to sit down with some of our counties and look at these maps now that have been completed and look at what spectrum, what SOCs, what all the different vendors that have been awarded are doing. And you saw that example of how they're using that as match on that project. This would be an opportunity now, while those efforts that Ashley, SOCs, others are doing, to pick up some additional area perhaps. So now's the time to start that planning. I think if my memory serves me correct, the next power application round is next winter, like February, maybe that time frame, January, February. So there's time to plan now to sit and look at the maps and say, okay, here's an area that needs, has the businesses, has the residential, as Sean laid out earlier, and start prioritizing those and trying to work with making it happen. There's a lot of movement on this. I've heard some new things that I don't want to say them here and get people excited, because I'm not sure I totally understand what was said. But in government, we live in a world where there's lines drawn in the sand and you can't go outside of those bounds. I'm hearing some things, I'll say it this way, that sound like some of the programs for broadband are looking to be a little more flexible with applicants and who can own the infrastructure. But I don't want to say specifically, these are things I want to look into a little more before I would commit to saying so-and-so is an eligible entity. But I think we're starting to see some flexibility, public-private partnerships that can create situations where a lot of this planning is timely, that's been done, so that we can pursue the areas that are still shown as not served in our region.
Yeah, appreciate that. I do think it's really critical that we don't take our eye off the ball. That just because an area is awarded doesn't mean it's going to get built. And that's where the public side of the public-private partnership comes in. Is on the public side, we can make sure that someone is watching and that we can verify. Like, we want to see that whole map turn green. We want the whole map turn dark green. I want to hear people saying, I got to move into the country to get better broadband. It's really important part of the public-private partnership. We did a public-private partnership in the Southern Ohio Healthcare Network. So the Southern Ohio Healthcare Network was built and managed by the large healthcare providers in Southern Ohio, Holzer, Adina, and at the time it was Ablenus, and Ablenus now is part of
Ohio Health.
Ohio Health, thank you. And it was the Southern Ohio Healthcare Network that won $16 million from the FCC, but not a penny of it ever actually went through the Southern Ohio Healthcare Network. So we were the recipient of the money. Then we had to go out to bid to select a provider. Horizon Telecom won that, but Horizon, every time they said, okay, we finished a section, the Southern Ohio Healthcare Network would verify that. And not until we verified it and signed off on it would the FCC pay them. So every payment back to Horizon from that program had to be approved by the public partner. That's, to me, where that's probably the best version of public-private partnership in my mind. But it can be a range of involvement of the public partner. But it's really critical that we keep our eyes on what's going on here, that we don't just trust. It's trust but verify.
Correct. And I mentioned earlier that I'd known Tom for several years, in excess of 10, I know. And when we had a relationship before that was right after the SOX project, it was when Horizon was awarded a NTIA grant of $66 million to put in some of that middle mile that Tom and Sean showcased earlier in our region. And as part of that, we talked then about, okay, our next step, we got the middle mile and let's get it to the last mile. But the programs weren't there. There wasn't a rush to, locally to change things. And I think we took our foot off the gas is what we did. Tom and I talked about that when he got this contract, that this time around, as long as we're able to, we want to keep the foot on the gas. I don't think OVRDC wants to become broadband experts. We want to utilize a broadband expert to help us with facilitating this. We'll build on our expertise is to work with a group like Reid Consulting Group that is understanding of the technology and so forth, and hopefully keep this, as Tom just said, not go 10 years and then say, oh wait, now we need to do this. We've spent the last 10 years foot off the gas. We want to keep the foot on the gas, keep this thing moving. And that's our commitment, I think, to broadband in the region, is to facilitate that public side of watching what's happening, trying to find funding that can continue to serve those areas that are unserved, and rely on someone else, though, to tell us what technology it's going to take to get there, because you don't want John engineering a fiber network. I have no idea. You get 2 tin cans and a string from me.
And I think it does make a lot of sense for the ISPs to be the ISPs. It's hard for a government to jump into the ISP business. It's a complicated business, and I think I like this model of the public partners helping secure the funding and then monitor the progress while the ISP does what the ISP does.
Totally agree with that. I don't think any government wants to get into the broadband business, and at least in our part of the state. I know there are a few places in Ohio that have done it, but those are more wealthy areas, and I don't even know what their track record is as far as success, but they've ventured in that area. I don't think any of our counties want to do that. I've not heard any one of them tell me we want to get into the broadband business.
Well, this whole idea of there being broadband consultants, there really shouldn't need to be broadband consultants. I mean, we should have solved this problem over the last 30 years with $100 billion out of the FCC. So our intent is to work ourselves out of the job. We don't want to just keep studying it. We want to identify, prioritize, and fund so that we actually solve the problem.
Well, I think at this point, the maps are something that we appreciate Reid Consulting Group producing those, sharing them with us. We want you to utilize them at the county level. We want to help you with keeping those updated with applications for those areas that we see that are unserved that make sense, and basically getting it to where, as Tom just said, the entire county, entire OVRDC region, 12 counties, is all green, and we've mission accomplished. So with that, if there are no other questions, we said we would have you all done by 10:15. I don't want to let anyone leave here without getting their question answered. So are there any other questions real quick, and then we'll end this?
Don't really have a question. I just want to thank you for the maps and the work that you've done. It's very interesting, very helpful. Looking forward to working with public-private partnerships.
That's great. Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, look forward to working with you, sir. Okay, well, we'll stay in touch as we move forward with this, and hopefully have other opportunities to put out updates like this, maybe 6 months and a year, and we will move forward from there and keep you posted. But thank you for your participation this morning. Thank you, Reid Consulting Group, for the work you've done for our region. And with that, enjoy your Friday and have a great weekend.
All right. Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
everyone.